Welcome to the Ringer NFL show. Sheil Kapadia back with Diante Lee and Steven Ruiz. Good to have you watching on FanDuel TV or listening on Spotify. 3 more wildcard games on Saturday. The best game of the weekend so far. On Sunday. The best game of the weekend so far on Sunday night. Commanders-Bucs. We also get a Bills victory. We also get an Eagles victory over the Green Bay Packers. We're going to talk about all 3 of the games. Ruiz, you live in the DC area. Are you hearing like pots and pans clanging outside? Are people celebrating in the streets? Are you engulfed in the environment, even though you're not a Commanders fan?
No, not really. I don't think there are like a lot of Commanders fans in DC. It's like a transplant city. Like you go to a Nationals game, you go to a Wizards game, and it's mostly the other team's fans. And Washington plays in Landover, Maryland, which is about like 40 minutes away from where I live. So I would have to go a far distance to kind of find where the Commanders fans are celebrating right now.
There you go. But Diante, I mean, even you where you're at, you probably we'll see some Jaden Daniels jerseys around town this week with the way that game ended.
1000%. Because I'm in San Diego, which is a military town. So people from all over land over here, which means that you usually see a lot of the national brands, Steelers, Commanders, Cowboys are all very well represented out here. And for me as an Eagles fan, obviously, my father being a Cowboys fan, I have been at least tangentially connected as a fan or watcher of the Commanders for a long time. So interesting to see where they are now as a team and how quickly they've been able to turn this thing around.
Well, let's start with that. Washington Commanders 23-20 over the Bucs. Sunday night, a back and forth game, an entertaining game. I think we looked at this and thought these are 2 evenly matched teams. Washington gets the ball, 4:41 left. They do not give it back. They've run the clock down. Jaden Daniels with the big completion on 3rd down. He hits Austin Eckler for another one. He evades Kalijah Kancey on a 3rd down run for another 1st down, and they kick the game-winning field goal. And there are just moments in this game where it felt like what Todd Bowles and that defense were doing, it was just like slow motion for Jaden Daniels. He just moves in a way where I'm not saying he makes every right decision and is accurate with every single pass, but just the way he operates in an environment like this for a franchise that had not won a playoff game since 2005. I don't know that there's a fan base that should be more excited than the Washington Commanders fan base is right now. And Diante, when you look at this Washington team, I don't know what stood out to you in their performance tonight, but also going forward here now. They're either going to go to Philadelphia or Detroit. And as confident as those fan bases might be going into the divisional round, when this guy comes to your city, you can't be that confident because he can put the team on his back and make plays with his arm and his legs.
1000%. It's funny. I think that in a lot of ways, we've had conversations about quarterbacks that we believe are limited in one way or another. And then they come out and have these games that kind of show that they're starting to build some layers in how they perform. And I thought that the second half of this game in particular was a big one in that direction for Jaden Daniels. You started to see the Bucs in passing downs really rolling coverage over the top of Terry McLaurin, trying to take away the deep passes on the outside, outside of the numbers. And we saw Naomi Brown have a great game in the middle of the field. And a lot of the credit with that is Jaden Daniels hanging in the pocket, scrambling when he needed to, but when it was time to look for his second or third part of the progression, he was able to deliver the ball where he needed to in the seams, on dig routes, whether it's on the backside of a concept or being able to speed through the first and second look in his progression and get the ball where it needs to be. That's what playoff football is about, right? And I think that Tampa Bay did a great job of trying to force this team to play left-handed. They sold out up front to stop the run. They got a bunch of penetration. This was a great Vita Vea game. I mean, their front in general, all the big bodies that they have definitely caused problems for the Commanders and put Daniels in a lot of situations where the only way for the problems that Washington was being faced with to be solved was him extending plays when he needed to, him being efficient with the ball when he needed to, and avoiding the negative plays that had kind of plagued the second half of the season when this play was a little bit more up and down. So while I don't necessarily, again, this is when we talk about like spinning it forward, I don't know if this changes their outcome, but you said it, Sheil. Next round, no matter who they're faced off against, you have to be concerned about what Jaden Daniels is going to do to you in a one-game sample size, because his dynamic athletic ability and what he's continued to build upon as a passer is something that deserves a lot of respect right now in the league.
Yeah, Ruiz, where are you at with it? I know we talked before about some of his, like, taking sacks and can he work the middle of the field? Some of these things that were fair questions about him coming into the NFL. This game, he takes 1 sack for 0 yards in this game. He was hitting some inbreakers. Just when you look at him, like, I don't know if there's another quarterback who he compares to where you're like, all right, this is the guy who his profile is the same as. But when you look at him, I mean, what are your questions with him? Where do you think he's grown the most? You've watched his film throughout the course of the season.
I think what he's proven is that he's a high floor player. And like we used to view these types of prospects as the high ceiling guys and the guys where the floor maybe isn't as high. And like a guy like, I don't know, Mac Jones was like a high floor prospect. But like all season, we've seen how his athleticism just changes the math for the Commanders offense. Like if they fall behind the chains or the play doesn't really work out, he could just evade the pressure and comfortably run for 4 or 5 yards. Like if it's 3rd and 4, it feels like scrambling for most quarterbacks is like the 4th or 5th option. For him, it feels like it should be the first option because he's so damn good at it. And that's nothing to take away for what he is as a passer, because I think that's the thing that's kind of surprised me the most. I mean, it was very clear that he was accurate on his tape at LSU, especially like in the quick game area. But I think his accuracy to the intermediate area of the field has stood out over the course of the season. I think Washington has really leaned into that down the stretch of this season. And that's where you've seen the most growth from him as a passer, at least in terms of volume. I think early on in the season, they were really relying on those RPOs and getting the ball out quickly. And I think we've seen the pass game get more fleshed out as the season has gone along. And I think his accuracy is a big reason why they're able to do that without the worry of necessarily him taking a sack. Because he has taken sacks throughout the season. He didn't do it against the Bucs, but he's been good enough where he could take a sack and still get you ahead of the chains anyway. And that's like the mark of a good quarterback and the mark of a productive quarterback. I think what's going to determine his ceiling is the next steps he takes as a passer. And that's something that usually happens in year 2, year 3. So I think he's already ahead of schedule. We've seen guys like Mahomes and Allen and like any top quarterback, Lamar Jackson, improve as pocket passers in their 3rd and 4th year. And I think he's already established a high floor. It's going to be determined by how much he's able to flesh out his work as a pocket passer, getting to a 2nd and 3rd read in a timely fashion. That determines if he's just merely like a top 10 quarterback or one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL who could challenge Lamar, Mahomes, Allen for that title later down the road.
Yeah. It's a strong foundation to work with. The athleticism, you mentioned it, the accuracy, the poise, all those things, the moments he's had this season. I mean, it's just, I don't remember a rookie quarterback. I don't think there has been one probably in our lifetime where if you just stacked up the moments they had as a rookie, there were this many for a guy. And again, another one tonight, 24 for 35 for 268 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Again, just 1 sack for 0 yards, which on his box score, that might be like the most impressive thing about it. Runs 13 times for 36 yards, takes some hits. He takes those hits and so far it does make me nervous at times. The one on the right sideline there where he got walloped like deep into the sideline,
suspended in the air for a little bit.
I'm like, is he getting it? But he seems to just get up, laugh it off, tap the defender on the helmet most of the time, and then move on to the next play. So this Commanders team, the phenomenal season continues. The magical season continues here. Again, if the Vikings win on Monday night, Commanders play the Lions. If the Rams win on Monday night, then the Commanders go to Philadelphia and face the Eagles for the 3rd time.
Like Jaden Daniels is the obvious story here, but I think we should at least give some credit to the coaching staff, like the whole coaching staff. I know like the defense was allowing Tampa Bay to move the ball, but I thought the way that Dan Quinn and his staff managed this game and turned it into a really short game made it so easy for it to get away from Liam Cohen and the Bucs offense. Like Baker Mayfield averaged 10 yards per drop back, but he only dropped back like 18 times. I think he had 18 attempts in this game. And the Bucs as an offense only had 44 plays. We've seen teams have 44 plays in the first half alone. I think Baltimore had like 32 snaps in the first half and ran on 24 of them in their game against the Steelers. So I thought this was, I don't know, maybe it wasn't, they didn't set out to have a game like this, but if they did, I think it was a very smart approach because this was a defense that was very clearly overmatched by their opponent in Tampa Bay's offense, and they didn't let it affect the game or at least the outcome of the game.
I
Yeah,
think in the
let's
broadcast they noted that, right? I think that Dan Quinn came into the week saying, like, we understand exactly what their run game is. We know how effective and efficient that offense can be, and that they can hold on to the ball by avoiding third downs altogether. So I think that they kind of set out to be aggressive with their third and fourth down play calling, trying to make sure that you're within 1 or 2 yards and then running the sneaks, allowing Jaden Daniels to be a threat with his legs to move the chains. And then, obviously we talked about what he was as a passer as well. I was going to make the same remarks even. I think that their management of the game, their understanding that they needed to possess the ball and not allow this to be a track meet, which would have really caused problems for their defense. They were really able to eliminate the run game as a viable strategy for Tampa Bay to control the pace of the game because the clock was always moving, because they were trailing for a lot of this game, or it was too tight for them to just sit on the ball and count on the fact that if they only came away with the field goal, that they could feel like they would get the ball back with another opportunity to go score later on. I think that Washington this is the kind of game that you hire a Dan Quinn for instead of taking a shot on a younger guy, right? That's not to say that Dan Quinn is the be-all, end-all as a coach, but I think that having an experienced staff with Quinn, with Kingsbury, and understanding how to kind of usher along his young quarterback in a playoff environment, they clearly put together a winning game plan for this week.
Yeah, let's I want to talk more about that. Let's take a break. We come back. I want to talk more about the coaching, like you mentioned, and also the Bucs aspect of this. Where do they go from here? All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Yeah, to your guys' points, I mean, and this has been the way the Commanders have played weekly, like these long, methodical drives and converting on third and fourth down. For the most part, they're not an explosive passing game, again, for the most part, but Tampa only had 7 possessions in this game, which is wild for, if you're listening. The average NFL game, I think, has around 11 possessions. So you're right. When you're the underdog, and they weren't like a huge underdog, I think these were two evenly matched teams, but yeah, I think the more opportunities the Bucs got in this game, the more likely it was going to be they were going to be able to score. The Commanders didn't really have an answer defensively. They get the big turnover there, and that was really self-inflicted. Baker Mayfield and Jalen McMillan on the jet sweep. I mean, it was 17-13 at that point in the game. Bucs have the ball. They just gotten a big red zone stand. It looked like they're in control. That changed the game. And then to your point, Ruiz, they were aggressive on fourth down. The Commanders, I think 5 times in this game, they went for it on fourth down. They convert 3 of them, including a huge 4th and 2 that ended up in a touchdown from the Tampa Bay 5-yard line. And the Bucs and Todd Bowles just historically has been more conservative with his approach. He faced a very tough decision. I want to hear what you guys thought about this one, where they're down 2017 with, again, under 5 minutes left. 4th and 3 in Washington territory. They kick the field goal. To me, that's like a coin flip type one. I mean, for example, I think Dan Campbell goes for it in that spot, and it's like, we're going to win the game. We're going to take a 4-point lead right here. We're going to go for it. We're going to score a touchdown. I think most coaches probably kick the field goal and say, we're going to tie the game and trust our defense. But like, Todd Bowles doesn't have the defense that he's had in years past. Diante, what did you think about that decision from Tampa?
To me, it's not necessarily one that I take a lot of umbrage with. I just think that, to your point, the more aggressive coaches maybe look at that and understand that the situation is, I can't trust my defense to get off the field because the team that we've been playing against has been possessing the ball for so long, and we know that they have all 4 downs to get themselves into field goal range and work the clock. You probably want to be the one who's controlling the clock a little bit more. And that's not to say that if they miss the field, or if they go for it and don't get it, that things go perfectly and you get another shot at the ball. Again, because Washington was possessing the ball as well as they were over the course of the game. I would have liked to see some aggression, but we know how out of character that would have been for Bowles in that moment. And he is almost always going to rely on his defense, regardless of what issues they may be having in a given game. I don't think that that's necessarily the deciding factor in why they lost this game. I would say that fumble in their own territory that allowed Washington to get a full possession lead on them was probably more costly in the balance of things. But it would have been nice, I think, to see a coach be aggressive there and try to make sure that his offense, which is his best unit, is the one that's determining the outcome of this football game.
Yeah, I think you kind of have to look at the decision not in a vacuum. You have to consider the context. And the context here is that Todd Bowles had a chance to dictate which unit of his was on the field in the game-deciding play, and he chose for his defense to be out there, where we know that the strength of this team has been the offense all season long, especially in short yardage situations. This feels like one of the perfect teams to deal with that situation, to get 3 yards. They've been getting 3 yards easily all season long. So in other cases, like even if Dan Quinn was in that situation, I wouldn't have minded if he kicked a field goal there, just because I think they have a wider margin for error, especially on the defensive side, than other teams, especially Tampa Bay. So yeah, I thought, like, on one hand, you kind of like that Todd Bowles is a defensive coach and he's like, I'm going to let my defense win it. On the other hand, it was just a bad gamble on his part. And I think you didn't have your best players on the field when the game was decided.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're injured at corner. You're right. I mean, I think if you asked him after the fact, what would have been more likely if he looked at it that way in the moment, would you rather take a chance on your offense converting a 4th and 3, or your defense stopping Jaden Daniels and that Commanders offense with the way the game had gone? Maybe he thinks about it differently, but you're right. That's kind of how it goes. This Bucs team, let's finish with this before we move on to the next game. Going forward, I was thinking about this Bucs team. Are they like a Bobo version of the Lions? You know what I mean? Like, they're not as good as the Lions, but good offensive line, schemed up offense, a quarterback who in the right system on the right day, you can say this guy's, I don't think Baker Mayfield's as good as Jared Goff, but you know what I'm saying with that. And then, like, they're not as talented, but that's how I was kind of thinking about them. But the same question we're going to ask about the Lions potentially if Ben Johnson leaves is, hey, what does this offense look like? That's what I'm looking at with the Bucs. I think if Liam Cohen comes back, they can feel pretty good about themselves in the NFC South. I don't think they're like a great team, but I think they're a pretty good team. And if you add some players defensively, maybe you can make some more noise next year. If Liam Cohen were to leave that situation, that would make me a little bit nervous, just because I think he did such a good job this season. Diante, where are you with the Bucs and kind of where they go from here after this loss?
It's a huge success in the sense of they were able to maintain stability of their offense despite losing their offensive coordinator in the offseason.
Upgrade, even, I would say.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think got a better version of Baker Mayfield out of this version of the offense than they had under Dave Canales, which is saying something for how well they looked offensively, how good they looked offensively last year. I think that the latter part of your statement is the bigger issue, right? That's kind of the thing that they're going to have to sort out how they want to manage. If Liam Cohen does leave, whether it's for another OC job or gets a head coaching opportunity, where does that leave you trying to take a third swing in 3 years to try to land on the right guy who understands how to build a system around a quarterback that has some limitations, and whether or not you can continue to keep this kind of linear upward trajectory with this offensive line that had a lot of issues before Liam Cohen and Dave Canales came in over the last couple of seasons. I'm not saying, and this is something I've talked about in Power Rankings, I'm not necessarily saying that you look at this situation and say it's time to kind of usher out Todd Bowles to keep your offensive coordinator in the building. I do think, though, if you continue to try to take these swings at offensive coordinator, you're going to crap out. And I think the issues that they have had with this defense suggest that this team is probably just as close to finishing next season 5-12 as they are going 10-7 again, if they continue along this kind of pathway, if they don't land on another great offensive coordinator.
But I will say this, I don't think they need a great offensive coordinator to like recreate this offense. Like, I feel like the offensive line is good. It's good now. They have a good collection of players. I think they have a good collection of skilled players. I think Baker Mayfield behind a good offensive line can be a good player. Like, he can be a good quarterback, a fringe top 10 quarterback. What we've seen with Baker Mayfield throughout his career is when he doesn't have that elite pass protection, he reverts it to the bad version of Baker Mayfield. So I think as long as you have this offensive line and you have a coordinator who is good, not great, not one of the best in the league, not earmarked for a head coaching position, I think they can maintain this. So I wouldn't be that much worried. I think it's easier to find a good offensive coordinator than it is to build this collection of talent that they have on the offensive side of the ball. As long as they don't botch it, I think they'll be fine next year offensively. But this is a franchise who has made that very tough decision before. Like, they moved on from Lovie Smith so they could promote Dirk Cutter, who was the offensive coordinator, to head coach. Didn't work out then. I don't know.
I could not stand watching those Dirk Cutter offenses.
It didn't work out. Todd Monken,
I get it. Yeah.
Todd Monken was on that.
When you said that name, I was just like, oh no, I had forgotten about that.
They weren't that bad. I feel like you're misremembering. That was like the height of Fitzmagic with the Bucs. I remember
I disliked watching them in a very, maybe there was 1 year in there that it.
Yeah, I think it was just bad, 1 year, honestly. Yeah, it was the year when Todd Monken got a job out of it. But yeah, they made that decision before, so I wouldn't put it past that ownership group to do that
interesting
this time around.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that until you guys brought it up. That is interesting. If Liam Cohen has people pursuing him in other organizations, would the Bucs look at it? I mean, this Bucs Pro Football Reference page, man, 4 straight division titles. They lose Brady and they win back-to-back. They win. I know it's not a great division, but still someone's got to win it. They win it in back-to-back seasons with Baker Mayfield. So I think you're right, Ruiz. I mean, they've got, wide receiver, running back, offensive line. It's a pretty, again, they're the Bobo Lions. I'm telling you, it's a nice environment to put a quarterback in there and see what you got there. But of course, the play caller is going to be a big part of that. So we'll see what they do here this offseason.
No mention of Cliff Kingsbury the entire segment. Guy paints a masterpiece in his first playoff win ever, and we don't even mention it.
Oh, I was waiting for you. I mean, you are, I don't know. I'm sure Cliff does have an agent. He's getting all these interviews, but I was waiting for, you are his honorary NFL agent. Yeah. So I was just waiting for you to potentially bring it up there. Do you want to give him his flowers here?
Yeah, I think one thing he did really well with this game plan is the usage of no huddle, which has been a thing all season long for them. Yes. But 70% of their snaps came without a huddle today, which was it must be a season high because I don't think they were that high throughout the season.
Well, season long, it's crazy. I think their average was, we just saw this last week, it's like 63%, right, and no other teams above like 25% for the season.
It's not even close. Yeah, I wrote about that in October, but I think what effect that creates, it's not like he's trying to go fast, because when you look at their average play clock, how much is remaining, it's like league average. So they're going fast without a huddle, but they're not snapping the ball quickly. And what they're doing, I think, is dictating the terms for the defense. Essentially, they get to decide which defensive personnel is out there based on whether the offense subs or not. And I think you just simplify the defense. Like Todd Bowles' defense isn't nearly as daunting if they got to get in vanilla calls and they can't disguise stuff and they can't move around because they're just trying to hurry up and line up before the snap. And I think that's something that he's done all season long. We talked about like Jaden Daniels kind of not losing control of the situation, but I think the coaching staff, through that use of no huddle, has kind of helped him out in that regard. And I think that's like one of the areas that's like, I would be more concerned if Washington lost Cliff Kingsbury than if Tampa Bay lost Liam Cohen. And I just mean that in regards to how the offense would look and how it would be structured. I think
actually, I think that there's a good argument for that.
Yeah, because
I wouldn't agree with that.
I'm not saying it wouldn't be as effective, but it would look radically different just because Cliff Kingsbury is unlike any other play caller in the NFL. Like, that is a objective take. You have to agree with that at least. Who else is calling 70%? No.
Well, yes, but theoretically, wouldn't you be able to find? Now you would have to find the right guy, but you could. They're like it's all over the college game. Like, you should theoretically be able to, or maybe there's a guy who worked in college who's now in the NFL. Like the spread.
You can't find a McVay assistant. I can go down the street and find a McVay assistant.
Well, but an actual good McVay assistant, not somebody who just picks up his lunch from time to time, which I actually thought. That's what I thought Liam Cohen was.
What this sounds like to me is that you guys are opening the door for USC to get rid of Lincoln Riley. So, hey, I mean, if Cliff Kingsbury does leave and he's looking for a way out the door, that might be a good landing spot for him.
No, but that's an insult for the Shanahan tree. The McVay tree has been good. Like, all of their guys have been good that they've that turned into head coaches. Not good, but they've been successful.
The thing that you were bringing up, Steven, what it kind of reminded me of as you were speaking was just like the early Jared Goff tenure in Los Angeles, right? Where they were going with a lot of tempo, going from first to second down to keep defenses from getting into blitz looks or exotic looks or design run stopping looks. And while the offense was not spread out then, a lot of the bones of that I think you can kind of find in Washington's offense in terms of quick tempo to get to screens, quick tempo to get to play actions. Their RPOs oftentimes, because of the areas they're attacking the field with the RPO, it kind of mimics those kind of bang routes that you would throw in the Shanahan or McVay offense off of play action with those, kind of glance routes and digs and end breakers. So I do think that there's a lot of value in that for a young quarterback in a playoff environment like this, where now when the goal is to possess the ball and when you know you have all four downs, you don't necessarily have to make any one play call as high leverage as it would be otherwise, because you know you're just playing the volume game. And while it's very easy for this offense to get knocked off schedule that way, I do think that when they're operating this way and the passing game is as efficient as it is on early downs, it certainly helps keep the quarterback away from being blitzed, and it keeps those defensive linemen at bay. And I think that that's a big reason why he was able to stay clean for so long in this game.
I just realized what's going to happen. Cliff Kingsbury goes to Chicago, coaches Caleb Williams, Chip Kelly, new Commanders offensive coordinator. Solved. There you go.
I actually wouldn't hate that. We
just solved it. See, sometimes we need to argue, yell at each other, but then we talk it out and we get to a resolution. So you heard it here first on the Ringer NFL show. All right, let's take a break. We come back. We move on to the next game. Eagles, Packers. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show in a game that I think most people had higher expectations for. Eagles, Packers going into the weekend. It looked like, hey, maybe this could be the marquee matchup. Didn't really end up that way. Eagles 22, Packers 10. Packers couldn't get anything going offensively, suffer a flurry of injuries at wide receiver. The Eagles game, in my opinion, it looked like a lot of Eagles games this season. But before I get to what I thought about it, Diante, what's your big take, from this game? Eagles advance. Do you feel better about them, worse about them, the same about them as they prepare for the divisional round?
I'd say I feel worse about them. And probably worse about them for predictable reasons. I think the defense is pretty clearly Super Bowl good. I think that we saw that today. They can play tight coverage against an aggressive style of offense. Even if that offense is missing their best man-to-man beater, I think that you could see some of the issues that Jordan Love was having in the pocket with guys not separating when he's used to being able to release the ball. And the fact that they've been able to get so much more out of this edge room than I ever would have imagined. Seeing Nolan Smith be a productive player, honestly, seeing Milton Williams be as productive as he was this year compared to what he looked like last season, when I wasn't sure that he was a player that the Eagles thought that he might be, when they decided to keep him and play him more often. I think that they have done so much to generate good play out of their front seven and getting these young guys to play sticky coverage. Darius Slay still playing sticky coverage out on the perimeter. That's a unit that can go and play anybody, and you should feel confident about. I was in the first half, maybe through like the first 2.5 quarters, kind of feeling like Jalen Hurts was playing more conservatively than just being like an abject disaster. But on the whole of the game, going back and looking at some of the throws he's turning down, looking at some of the pocket management, it's hard to feel like any of that's going to be fixed if they're behind schedule against the Vikings team, against the Lions in the NFC Championship, if that's who they matched up against. I don't know if this team's ceiling is as high now as I would like to think it is in terms of best case scenarios, because I haven't seen it up against the best competition in a little while now. I'm not sure if Jalen Hurts is that player this year.
I'm less concerned, honestly, and it's not because Jalen Hurts was good. Like, I agree with everything Diante just said, and like the ceiling for this passing game is very concerning. But when I look through the NFC, I just don't know which team has a defense that's capable of making them play with their right hand tied behind their back and making them not just into a drop back passing game. I think it's like deeper than that. I think you have to be able to rush with 4 and get pressure on Jalen Hurts. And if you can't and they have to blitz, then that just makes everything else easier for Jalen Hurts, because they have 2 mismatches on the outside, and then Dallas Goedert could just stiff arm his way through a secondary if he wants to a touchdown. So like in the NFC, like if the Lions were at full strength and they had their defensive line and Aiden Hutchinson was there, I would think that's a terrible matchup for the Eagles, but that's not the case. And I don't know which other pass rush in this conference has the ability to win that battle 4-on-5 against the best offensive line in the NFL. There are not a lot of pass rushes around the NFL, but all of them seem to be on the other side of the bracket right now.
Yeah, it's like this game felt like many of their games this season. Like I said, to what you guys were saying, their defense was fantastic. They limit explosive plays. They're stopping the run for the most part. Josh Jacobs had a fantastic run there in the second half, but for the most part, they're stopping the run. Their offensive line is very good. Saquon Barkley is having some eye-popping runs. And then when they have to drop back and pass the football, this was a 14th percentile game for a quarterback this season in dropback success rate. They were successful on 33% of their dropbacks, produced a positive play. This was, even for the Eagles, for Jalen Hurts this year, their worst game based on dropback success rate. And so all season long, I've had this thing where I'm like, the Eagles ceiling is going to be determined by whether their passing game can get it together in the playoffs. And I say it, and I say it, and I say it. And now they're in the divisional round, to Ruiz's point, and it's like you're 2 wins away from the Super Bowl. I think at some point, just kind of their talent becomes overwhelming offensively. Like there's going to be some type of answer today. It wasn't a lot, but like you guys said, their offensive line can control the game. Saquon Barkley can have a big run. Devontae Smith can make a play. AJ Brown didn't do it today, but he can. Dallas Goedert. And it's like, it's a weird type of offense to look at and analyze, because that's just what it is. Like one of their dudes is going to do something in this game that's going to be good enough, because they also might have the best defense in the NFL. Now, can that continue week after week? I mean, Ruiz, when you were saying it, if the Vikings go to Philadelphia next? Like can Flores do that? I mean, how would you view a Flores coach? I feel like he's got the mind to cook up something where this might not be good enough if the Eagles don't play better than they did today.
I don't even think you have to imagine it. Didn't they played, was it last year or the year before where they played in like the early season? I think it was a Thursday night football game, and Flores didn't have the horses he has now on the defensive side. And I think he gave Jalen Hurts a lot of problems. That was kind of at the beginning of the cover zero problem that Philadelphia had to work its way through last season. So yeah, I think that's totally possible. It's still a situation where you have to drum up pressure. And I think you're always going to leave yourself vulnerable to that, because it's not just you beating Jalen Hurts and that offense from last year. It's you beating Jalen Hurts and Kellen Moore. And I think they have had better answers against the blitz. So I don't know if that strategy would be as effective as it's been in past years. I just honestly think you have to win with 4. I don't know. I don't understand how you do it otherwise. Because you're not going to knock them behind the chains. You're just not going to do it. The offensive line is too good. And Saquon Barkley, if the offensive line lets defensive linemen through, Saquon Barkley's going to make them miss anyway.
Yeah, if you look at Jalen Hurts' splits, man versus zone, they are pretty glaring, where he has struggled much more against zone man. You can throw it up to one of those guys and they make a play. So it'll be interesting to see what their path looks like. He was coming back. He hadn't played in 3 weeks here. But again, I would be more likely to say, hey, it was a little rust and he's coming back if we hadn't seen this story over and over again. And it's just an uninspired passing game that doesn't warrant a lot of confidence. At the same time, the other parts of this team are so reliable, the defense, the coverage, the secondary, the offensive line, the run game, that you wonder in a weird season in the NFC if it might be good enough to come out of the conference. So,
I mean, I feel like my main takeaway from this weekend as a whole is just like how we call it a quarterback league, but I feel like the evidence is overwhelming in the fact that it's an offensive line league. And if you have a dominant offensive line, the margin for error, even at the most important position in the league, even if you're paying that guy $50 million and he plays like this, it doesn't matter against a quality opponent in Green Bay. And we've seen that throughout the playoffs. Like the Bills won that game because of their offensive line and their run game. The Ravens dominated the way they did against the Steelers because of their run game. I don't know if I'm going to give their offensive line as much credit because Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are very good, but their offensive line is way nastier than it was a year ago. And I think that's helping them out. The Bucs are where they were because of their offensive line. The Commanders aren't where they were because of their offensive line, but they're where they are because of their ability to kind of control the situation and mitigate opposing pass rushes. And then Jaden Daniels' role in that by being a great runner. So it's an offensive line league, and it's been an offensive line playoffs. And I think for the Eagles, that offensive line might be good enough to drag them to the Super Bowl.
It is their superstar. There's no doubt about it. It's their offensive line. Let's take a break. I want to come back and talk about the Packers side of this, the way the season ended, how we feel about how their season went, and kind of where they go from here. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. So I don't know that the Jordan Love discourse will reach the levels of the Justin Herbert discourse, but he goes 20 for 33 here with 212 yards and 3 interceptions, finishes the game not only without Christian Watson, but without Romeo Doubs, without Jaden Reed. Now in the first half, they had those 2 guys at least, and they hadn't scored a point. They lose Elkin Jenkins, they're one of their best offensive linemen. Early in this game, they couldn't get anything going downfield per next gen stats. Passes of 10 plus air yards, 3 for 11 for 58 yards and 3 interceptions. I have long been a Jordan Love guy. And so I'm curious to hear where you guys are. Ruiz, we can start with you on this one, where you are with Jordan Love, where you are with this Packers team, this Packers offense. Like, how should a Packers fan feel about this season, and what do they do going forward? It's sort of a tricky question to answer, I feel like.
It is tough. I feel like Jordan Love is one of the toughest evaluations at the quarterback position in the NFL. And it's not just because of him and his individual skill set. It's his individual skill set in that offense and how that offense is structured. We don't often see like this style of offense, like the Shanahan, the McVay, the play action, under center, run game, sets up the pass game offense with a talent like this at the quarterback position. Usually those offenses are quarterbacked by a middling talent who knows the system and executes the system well. And I think that's what makes it so hard to kind of evaluate his game, because if you look anywhere on his tape, you could find the high level plays in the pocket. You could find the plays that make him look like a Josh Allen style of quarterback, but you could also find the plays where he's kind of benefiting from the same environment, like a Brock Purdy might benefit when San Francisco's offense was going well. And Right now, I think it's a 50-50 proposition. I know Green Bay committed to him long-term, but they kind of had to do that. And I honestly don't have an answer. I think it's up to Jordan Love. And I do think this experience kind of exposed his weaknesses in the same way that Houston's defensive performance exposed what weaknesses Justin Herbert has. I think, and Diante's was ahead of this. I feel like Jordan Love's reluctance to become a scrambler is starting to become an issue. Like, you can make the excuse for him that his receivers aren't getting open downfield, but quarterbacks have another option if your receivers are covered. It's to run the football, and I think he's been too slow to run the football. Maybe it's an athleticism problem, because if you look at his 40 time that he ran in the combine, it's not very fast. Like, it's comparable to pocket passers, or guys that we traditionally look at as pocket passers. So I don't know if there's a better option for him, but I do think it's something he has to add to his game. He has to also be able to become a runner outside of the pocket and not just a thrower.
I mean,
he had one today that was kind of surprising because it happened so rarely. It was like, well,
yeah.
And like he looked capable of doing it. So just based off of that, when you were describing it, Diante, my thing was like, it feels like it's more of a thing that maybe he doesn't want to do or chooses not to do, rather than something he's not able to do.
I think that Jordan Love is kind of in the same. To me, I look at him similarly to how I look at CJ Stroud, which is in the sense of like, today I got to learn what Jordan Love looks like when he can't trust the interior of his offensive line. And now the success of the offense is going to be heavily dependent on his management of the pocket. And I learned today that he's actually not the greatest pocket manager. And a lot of his best plays have come from him being able to pat the ball and be able to work through an entire progression and remain aggressive as a downfield passer. And that's great when Elgton Jenkins is on the field and they have their full complement of offensive linemen. I think that what Philadelphia was able to do with just moving him off his spot, you got to see a little bit more frantic play from Jordan Love and trying to remain aggressive as he's moving off his spot. And that's one of the ways that I think the bar is kind of set a little bit too high in terms of comparing him to Josh Allen. I don't think that he's that level of player yet. Not that he'll never be there. I do think that he maybe has to understand that he's got to run. He's got to be better at resetting his feet when he's moved off his spot and being able to remain accurate in the middle of the field if that's an area he wants to attack, even if his platform is being messed with. And none of this is to say, similar to how we were talking yesterday about Justin Herbert, that he's not a very talented quarterback, that he doesn't understand how to work through his progressions. I was just looking for a change of gears from him today. Once it was clear that working the ball underneath was going to be their best option. They weren't going to be able to throw the ball in the middle of the field as aggressively and as often as they would like to, because Philadelphia safeties were playing so aggressively on dig routes, on those crossing routes, and their corners are basically matching like man-to-man on end breakers from number one receivers as well. I didn't see the necessary changing gears in terms of extending and punishing a defense for playing such tight coverage, and I didn't see enough pocket management and extending a place to throw either. That does not mean that he's not capable, and it doesn't mean that I don't think that he won't add that to his game in years to come. I just think that right now we're seeing some of the ways in which his game is still a little bit more incomplete than it looks when things are clean for him in the pocket.
Yeah, I would consider this performance way more concerning than Justin Herbert's performance on Saturday, because we saw weaknesses that, like, people like Diante have been pointing out before this game happened. Like, Justin Herbert's mistakes in that Texans game we know those aren't mistakes. We know those aren't weaknesses for Justin Herbert. We know he's not going to throw a bunch of interceptions. We know he's not going to miss a bunch of throws like he missed against Houston. And we know that pocket management is a strength for Justin Herbert, but we saw a version of Jordan Love that we've seen throughout this season and that we saw in his cameo appearances before he became the starter. And early on last year, when he first became the starter, inaccuracy has been a problem for him, throwing the ball high, especially over the middle. If you're going to target the middle of the field as much as he does, you can't be as high as he is, as consistently as he is. You're going to throw interceptions. And the unwillingness, I guess, or the lack of eagerness to become a playmaker, like I laid out before, is another one. And those are two issues that I think he's going to have to work through. And I think his consistency with decision-making has been a problem throughout the season also. So I think there are clear holes in his game. But the thing is, this is his second year as a starter. It was a disjointed season due to injury. It was a disjointed season, not due to only his own injuries, but also injuries to his supporting cast, especially in this game alone. So, like, I'm not by any means like waving a giant red flag here. I think this is just standard progress for a young quarterback who hasn't played much. And I just want to see what he looks like next year. I think next year is the year where we figure out what this guy is going to be for the next 5 to 10 years.
And great defense still matters. We see in the wild card round. Diante, this should have been. Yeah, I'm surprised this wasn't your first point. You should be the one waving the flag for defenses. 2 top 5 defenses against 2 quarterbacks who get a lot of hype, and they made them both look terrible. Justin Herbert and Jordan Love. The Eagles with Vic Fangio and their defense, and then the Texans with D'Amico Ryans and their defense. And I think the creation point, just as you guys were talking about it, it's like when you do face a great defense and you don't have a tremendous supporting cast, the creation aspect of quarterback play becomes so important. I mean, like you saw it with Jaden. I know it's not the same thing. He wasn't facing the same level of defense, but just like sometimes you just have to make a play. And neither of those guys were really Herbert or Love this week. And both of them have the physical skill set, in my opinion, to do that. But Justin Herbert doesn't scramble at all in that game. And to your point, Diante, Jordan Love was not in like playmaking mode in this game. And does he have that in him? Can he do that more? Or is this just like Ruiz was saying, the structure, Matt LaFleur, operate the offense, but operate it at a high level because you have this unique arm talent? I'm still in on Jordan Love. I'm not. I think if you're a Packers fan,
I think everybody on the show is still in.
There's no physical limitation, which it would be my concern. Like when you watch a physically limited quarterback struggle in the same ways, there is reason to be concerned. When you have a high ceiling quarterback who has these gaps to fill in his game, you shouldn't be concerned. It should be not expected, but you shouldn't be surprised when this stuff happens. And he went up against the best defense in the NFL, and we've seen good quarterbacks look pedestrian against similar deep. We saw LeBar kind of get reined in against this defense. We saw Josh Allen go 10 for 30 against Houston during the regular season and have one of those games where we were potting about it, like, what's wrong with Josh Allen after? I think the other part of it is just unfortunate timing for these guys. They were in island games in the postseason where everyone's watching and they played their worst games of the season.
Well, and this is something that we talked about yesterday in terms of like, we are now in that phase of the season where you can put together something where you sell out to take away what an offense does best. And in the conversations we've had about quarterbacks that have come up short, they have each faced defenses that are excellent at crafting game plans, that are going to force you to play left-handed, that are going to force you into uncomfortable positions and make you get out of character in order to defeat them. And we have seen that for young, very talented quarterbacks, they still have a ways to go in terms of understanding what the next layer in their game is in order to be a playoff winning quarterback. Even if we do think that the environments around guys like Justin Herbert and Jordan Love can improve, I don't know if I want to bank on Green Bay finding the magic number 1 receiver that can't be guarded one-on-one, because that's really not their approach to roster construction right now. And I think it's also okay to say that like the receivers that they have on roster, for as talented as they are individually, that we have seen as we've come down the stretch of the season and when they've played against their top opponents, that this is much more of a whole being great, or the whole being greater than some of their parts, which is okay. It just means that elite defenses are going to challenge Jordan Love to be the ceiling raiser. You're not going to be able to rely on running a bunch of deep and intermediate end breakers to break a defense when they know that what to expect. They're going to challenge a quarterback to beat them in a different way.
Yeah, he had a bad game. There's no way around it. Played a great defense, had injuries at wide receiver, but still played poorly. If you zoom out and you're a Packers fan and you want the optimistic view, they were 4th in passing DVOA this year. They were 4th in passing DVOA last year. So on the season as a whole, he has shown he can quarterback a high level, efficient offense, even though the taste in your mouth going into the offseason might not be great. All right, let's take a break. We come back. We're going to talk about 2 quarterbacks, no ceiling, no limitations, no, hey, just do this to them and they can't do anything, because we have, I believe, one of the most anticipated divisional round matchups in recent NFL history coming up next weekend. We'll talk about that when we come back. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. So all this quarterback talk, I would say, does Mahomes still belongs in a class of his own, I think, with the accomplishment. And then I think the next one is Mahomes, Lamar, and Josh Allen belong in a class of their own. And then everybody else we can have conversations about. Do you agree with that assessment? Do you have issue with that assessment?
No.
Not only do I not have an issue with the assessment, I think that as these guys hit their primes, we're seeing the chasm kind of grow, I think, in how I consider that top tier of quarterback, those 3 guys, and the rest of quarterbacks that I love in the NFL. Right. I think that you're just saying that there's a world of difference between where they're at right now and where the rest of the league is.
There you go. All right. So we talked about Lamar Jackson on the previous show. If you missed that, check it out in the feed. We recorded that Saturday night. Josh Allen comes in Sunday afternoon, not to be outdone. They give up the deep touchdown early. I say, hey, we were saying on the Ringer NFL show, this could be, Broncos could be a little frisky. They were not frisky. They were frisky for a half, I guess. It was 10-7 at halftime. And then the Bills outscore them 21-0 in the second half, win 31-7. And now next weekend, we have Texans at Chiefs. And then we have, more importantly, Ravens at Bills. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. I mean, this game for the Bills was a 97th percentile game based on EPA per drive. They did whatever they wanted. The Ravens on Saturday night, 93rd percentile game based on EPA per drive. Island game, all eyes on you. Didn't matter. These looked like two offenses that cannot be stopped. And Diante, I cannot wait. I cannot wait to watch Josh Allen. I can wait for the narratives that come out of that game because I want to remember how I feel right now about the greatness of these two players. But I also can't wait to watch those teams go at each other next weekend.
I'm so glad that the Bills wild card game played out the way that it did. So we are not coming into this week with any concerns that we shouldn't be having about an offensive line or the run game or whether or not the given quarterback is ready for this moment. The stakes are set where they need to be for the level of quarterbacks we're going to see. I think both teams have built, like you said, machine-like offenses that can beat you in a multitude of ways before we even get to what their quarterbacks are as individual talents, and their quarterbacks are playing at the peak of their powers. This is about as good of a divisional round matchup as you can possibly get in the NFL.
This could be like the Super Bowl, Ruiz. Honestly, I mean, it's that's what it
in terms
feels
of stakes.
like.
Definitely the biggest game since
they're two of the best teams in the NFL. There's no doubt about it.
In terms of like stakes and legacy and all that talk, it's probably the most important game of the postseason. Like, it might be the more important than the Super Bowl if Patrick Mahomes is in it again and wins it. Like, who cares? We've seen that before. We're tired of it. Like, get a new big guy.
That's where Mahomes has gotten. Because I do agree with you. It sounds crazy to say. It's like, we'll just be like, all right, yeah, he won again. Who cares?
Who cares?
Any other material? It's getting boring. Got hacked. But no. And the funny thing is, we're going to talk about the quarterbacks all week long, right? That's going to be every conversation about this game. But what we saw over the weekend was how well these offenses are built to not put so much stress on their quarterbacks. Like, I think any quarterback may have been able to win both of those games with the way those running games were working and the offensive line. Like, Josh Allen, for instance, he made a couple of ridiculous plays, as he usually does, as he's done all season long, but he didn't really have to play all that. He didn't have to try that much in this game. Like, the offensive line, I felt like set the tone early on. Like, in the second drive, there was that 16-yard James Cook run where they kind of pushed the pile for an extra 12 yards or whatever. Yeah. I thought at that moment the game was over because Bills had already been moving the football on the ground. After that, they continued moving the football on the ground, but you really saw that their offensive line was going to dominate their matchup against the Broncos front. And like the game script we kind of laid out on the preview show was the Broncos had to win in the running game. They had to win on first down on both sides of the ball, and they couldn't do it. And they especially couldn't do it on defense. And Sean Payton said it after the game. He's like, we needed to control the clock and time of possession to win this game, and we did it. And if anything, it went all the way in the other team's favor. They held the ball for 40 minutes. And I mean, if Buffalo's playing like that, I don't know how you stop them on defense, but the only problem is the team they're going up against now has the same exact formula with Lamar Jackson in that running game.
And the Bills played their divisional round loss last year against the Chiefs like this. I mean, it was long, methodical drives, just run the football, and they're doing it effectively. There was a time where I was like, man, they're not producing the explosive plays in the past, because there is more of a margin for error if you're only able to play like that. Then you miss a field goal. In the run game, it's like everything has to go right for a run, for a run to gain 8-10 yards or whatever. But then in the second half, they showed, all right, they can just make plays, and he can get in creator mode, and Keon Coleman and Ty Johnson, what a catch there in the back of the end zone. So both these offenses have all these different things. How do you want to play this way? Okay, we could play that way. You want to run the ball? We'll run the ball. You want to run with the quarterback? We'll run with the quarterback. You want to hand it off under center? We can do that. You want to get a sixth offensive lineman out there? We can do that. You want to throw in structure? We can do that. You want the quarterback to create? We can do that. I mean, it's incredible. First and second in offensive DVOA, both these teams. And it could just come down to something weird, a special teams play, a fumble from a skill position player. But I am very curious to see what are the defensive game plans going to be. What are they doing in terms of game script and how they want to play and aggressiveness and how much confidence do they have in their own defenses. So there are so many angles of this game that we're going to cover this week, Diante, but I can't wait. I can't wait to watch these two guys go at it.
I mean, it's a perfectly designed matchup because these two teams have built themselves so similarly offensively to be able to be in their own weight class, right? Like you're watching the Bills on offense put 6-0 linemen on plus a tight end. And I mean, I know that the weight differentials are not as big as it looked on the screen, but the Bills look like they weigh, like each one of their players weighed 100 more pounds than the Broncos players. And
Pushing
they were moving
around.
bodies like that, you know? So they really didn't need, like Steven said, they didn't need a ton from Josh Allen. And in the moments that they did, you saw Josh Allen do what he does when he's his most unstoppable, which is just moving around the pocket. If you do get pressure, I can't be sacked. And I'm going to be able to extend behind an offensive line that can protect me. And I think that version of this team, there's really nothing you can do. And we've seen it in their shootouts. You saw it in the Rams game, even though they didn't come out on the winning end of that. We saw it in the Lions game as well. When they're rolling like this and the run game is a legitimate factor that defenses have to respect, they can do whatever they want. That's exactly how Joe Brady likes to call plays. And like you said, when we get to next week and you're looking at Baltimore and 22 personnel with the 6 offensive linemen on one side, and then Buffalo comes out on the very next drive and they've got their 12 personnel with the 6 offensive linemen out there. Both of these teams are going to be poking and prodding at controlling the line of scrimmage as much as possible. So that way their quarterbacks can always work in winning game script scenarios. And to me, like you said, that means that we probably are going to get what's going to be a weird Derrick Henry run or a fumble at an inopportune time or a tip pass or something going wrong.
Weird call. Don't make it be a weird call, refs, if you're listening right now.
Looking at Brandon Stevens. I'm looking at you, Brandon Stevens. Please, no pass interferences or illegal contacts. But no, I mean, that's how tight the margins are going to be, is that we are going to be talking about this game in a week, and every factor that we preview is probably going to have some role in what the result ultimately is. And that's the best way you can line this up. Yeah.
It's going to be awesome. We will talk about that game at length this week on the Ringer NFL show. Let's finish with the Denver Broncos. They go into this game. They've had a successful season, obviously, but they don't get it done here. They score on that first possession, then don't do much the rest of the way. How do you look at this, Ruiz? Because success isn't linear in the NFL. Like if you're an optimist, you could say, hey, they got the rookie quarterback that had a successful season, build on it next year. I don't know that it's necessarily going to go that way when you kind of look at the roster, but how do you feel about this Broncos team going forward? Where would you like to see them add, and kind of what are your expectations for that?
I mean, I think you got to feel a little optimistic. Like, I think the one question you definitely answered this year is that Sean Payton, the game hasn't passed Sean Payton by. Like Sean Payton is still an asset as a coach, and that's one of the most positions that you have to fill when building an NFL team. So I think you're optimistic about that. I think you're optimistic about what you've seen from the Bo Nix, Sean Payton partnership. I don't think you're like if you're me, I'm not going to change my take on Bo Nix's ceiling radically. I think he's been a better scrambler than I anticipated. I think he's shown better arm strength than I anticipated, but there's still the same questions that we kind of had in October. We still have those same questions now, especially after a bit of a disappearing act after that hot start to the game in Buffalo today. But I think Sean Payton's he's got this team headed in the right direction. I thought the game plan today was the game plan they had to employ. It just didn't work out. I saw some criticism about his play calling, but I don't know what else they expected him to do. Did they want him to ask Bo Nix to match Josh Allen throw for throw? I don't know about that. So I don't think this changes any perception of this team for me going forward. And I think the good taste that the regular season left in our mouth should still be in there as we go into the offseason. You agree, Diante?
100%. You called the Bucs the Bobo Lions. I look at the Broncos like the Bobo Vikings in a lot of ways. Like they put together a defensive system that maximizes some limited talent along the second level. They've been able to get the most out of these light bodies up front by blitzing and being multiple and playing aggressively. You know that they have what may be the defensive player of the year in Patrick Surtain playing out at corner. So you have plenty to build around on that side of the ball. I think that really what's missing is a dependable early down passing game. that's what they needed in order to be able to go blow for blow with Buffalo in this game. When they've looked at their worst, they have not had a reliable early down passing game this season. And Bo Nix did make a lot of leaps and bounds in terms of taking big chances on vertical play action shots and being able to work within the structure of the offense when things are designed properly. But if he's going to take that step to making this team closer to what we've seen from Minnesota this year, he has to be what Sam Darnold was on early downs, which is a guy that can be aggressive, even if it means sometimes putting the ball in harm's way. He may have to do so to maximize what this offense wants and needs to be. And if they're able to do that, then yeah, I think that the forecast for them should be pretty optimistic. And this season was beyond a success as far as I was concerned. I wasn't sure that Bo Nix was going to look like a viable starting quarterback 4 or 5 weeks into the year, and he certainly looks as such for the time being. And if they're able to add some things in terms of the early down passing game with him as a quarterback, I think that will go a long way into improving their prospects in the conference.
Go ahead.
That dig route on third down, that was not a throw I expected to see out of Bo Nix. I think that was a sign of progress. We didn't see anything after that throw, besides the touchdown pass.
Besides the touchdown, right.
Well, anything like the dig route again for the rest of the game, but it was an impressive throw, and it wasn't a throw that he was making consistently early in the year, and I think you started to see it more as the season wore on, which is a positive sign.
Yeah, I think, like you guys said, if you're a Broncos fan, you hadn't been to the playoffs for a long time, at least they have a plan. I don't know. We'll see where the plan takes them, how far they can go with the plan, but they had a plan. And the first year of the plan with Bo Nix, this Sean Payton, this partnership, the signs were good. I do worry a little bit about their defense. They were not good at all last year, and they were very good this year. And I feel like they do have a little bit of a volatile style of play. And when they faced the big boys, it seemed like they got exposed a little bit, not just in this game, but some other games here down the stretch. So I wonder if that's a group that could take a step back. We'll see what they do. In terms of this game, I thought it was pretty glaring that they don't have a reliable run game. And so like you said, if you want to be like, all right, let's possess the ball and string together drives, I don't think that's something they've really had all season long. And then to Diante's point, I mean, there's still the pass catchers there. To be the Bobo Vikings, you got to get me a Bobo Justin Jefferson at least. I don't think they have that yet, but they have a nice offensive line. They have some nice talented pieces on defense, and they have a coach who should have a plan for how he wants this quarterback to progress in year 2. So we'll see what happens with the Broncos this offseason. All right. We will be back Monday night. One more game. Rams, Vikings. I think that's going to be a fun one. I think that's going to be a little bit like Commanders-Bucs on Monday night. We're going to go live on the Ringer NFL YouTube channel, just like we did on Saturday night. If you joined us then, thanks for joining us then. If you didn't, now's your chance. You forgot over the weekend. Well, now you can join us Monday night right after the game. We come on the mics. We talk about whatever is in our heads, get into arguments about Sam Darnold and Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay and who knows who else on Monday night. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Check that out. You can, of course, listen to it on Spotify after the fact if you have an early bedtime or something like that. So we'll talk to everyone on Monday night. Thank you to Diante and Ruiz. Thank you to Christopher Sutton for producing. Thank you to Tucker Tashjian for all of his video help here. Additional production supervision by Conor Nevins, Arjuna Ramgopal, and of course Dan Comer. We will talk to you Monday night on the Ringer NFL Show.